It is a hidden park, and like actually Winfell Quarry Gardens, I know we've got some people here from Winfell Quarry Gardens, people don't know they exist, even local people don't know exist, and hats off to the publicity team, and Wilderbrook Park is actually a regular feature now in the Sheffield Telegraph and things, so thank you very much, Maggie, and it's becoming well known. And as you say, relief is probably the right word for people who use the park when they're coming of the toilets, and I know it would be a great relief for the volunteers who go in the park. But I also should say as well, because we've got the questions coming in up later, we've got Joe here representing the Parks and Countryside team. We've got Councillor Richard Williams, who actually is chair of the Parks and Countryside Committee, and my colleague from Eccleshall Ward, because although it's in Dore and Totley Ward, you know, Eccleshall people use it as well. Barbara Masters, the councillor from Eccleshall in the audience as well. And can I hand over to Sheila now, who is going to talk about the next steps.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Colin. And thank you, Ian and Christine. It's a double act from Nick and myself. Nick's got the hard bits and I've got the easy bits. On the back of your agenda, you should find a list of priorities. When we read the draft of the report, and by the way, if you're puzzling over the absence of the report, it will be available on the website, the Friends website, and also your own website, won't it? But it's quite long, and we don't have the resources to copy it for everybody, so I hope you'll understand that. But I've lifted from the action plan that Ian and Christine have devised, I've lifted and added to that to make a set of priorities based on the recommendations in the report, which we have widely accepted. I think there's still some debate over the ponds, but broad acceptance. And so I've sifted out the first year objectives and then given you a taste of what we are thinking and planning ahead for, because, as you said, this is a marathon, not a sprint. There's enough work in that park to keep us all going for at least 10 or 12 years. And the rest, because whatever we do has to be maintained. And this is the point that Andy Mumford, the parks manager, makes all the time. If you want to do that, Sheila, fine, but you've got to maintain it. You know, otherwise the same problem will occur as occurred for the poor Parks Department. They couldn't keep up with what was needed. So we've got, if we're committing, we've got to commit for the long term. Right, Nick's going to talk about water in the wetland and also the recording systems. So I'm just going to very briefly give you a taste of what we plan to do this year in relation to the rest, starting with the enhanced gardened areas, which of course is a joy because you get to spend a little bit of money on planting and you can really make a difference quite quickly by hacking out some of the dreaded Alchemilla mollis that's spread around the horseshoe bed and other perennial weeds in inverted commas, and substitute for pollinating plants that are good for pollinators. And that's what we plan to do. We've already started doing that. The sunken garden is about 90% finished, but we will add cotoneaster and other things to the walls and gradually add more bulbs and so on. The horseshoe bed is about 40–50% redone. We'll add to that with other plants that are good for pollinators. It'd be nice to think that eventually 80 to 90% of what we're planting in the park is good for the wildlife. The proprietor of the cafe, are you here? No, he did say he would try and come, Jack Wainwright. They're very keen for us to help with planting around the cafe. Well, why wouldn't they be? But we hope to work very closely with the cafe and provide a really nice, colourful area around where they're rebuilding. We're going to take your advice on the buddleias and the massed alliums and one or two other things. And the mowing regimes, yes, Andy Mumford has agreed in principle, although he does say that it isn't easier because when you're mowing long grass, you don't know what's in it, and there's usually dog feces, so it has to be disposed of separately to ordinary mown grass. So, yeah, it isn't all saving time and effort.
Probably an education job for the dog owners, I think.
Well, yes.
Well,
yes.
playing fields is pretty grim.
Yeah. So our aim is to negotiate a part of the lawns that is nearest to the Limbrook. So not the formal lawns, but the bit adjacent to the Limbrook, and achieve this ecotone edge, yes? Is that the right term? Ecotone edge. And scrub. We must have scrub. Bog and scrub.
I have two things I'm passionate about with this.
Yep, bog and scrub. Right. Where we hold the summer music at the moment used to be a rose garden. It's in need of a bit of tender loving care, so once we've got the other formal areas under control, we'll turn our attention to that, but not this year. Tree planting, lots of opportunities there. Yes, we will engage with the neighbours on the western boundary. That's Moorview Farm, and who are actually very wildlife conscious, and they're the ones who've got the beehives, and they've planted trees, which are probably soaking up some of the water that should be filling our ponds. But yes, we will talk to them about doing more between their land and the park by way of hedging or increasing the rewilding anyway along there. And we'll apply to the Tree Council, who gave us money for the beech hedge by the top car park and the birch trees that are in the sunken garden. So we'll try another application to them for some trees to put along that boundary. The back of the house is a mess. We've started to clear it. There were herbaceous borders there. We will reintroduce, and there's a belt between the back of the house and the new planting of trees, which there's some rhododendrons in there. There's a question mark about whether they need to come out or not, but maybe people have forgotten about them. But it's an area that looks untidy, it's a mess. There's opportunities there for planting berry trees and nut trees. And the other thing we're going to do as part of creating the tree trail, where we've identified about 40 trees worthy of inspection, where those trees are currently inaccessible, we are cutting the scrub back to provide paths, and in so doing we will create these piles, log piles and so on for the wildlife. So that and also some of that tree trail will also be part of a new children's trail. So you can imagine you might go to find the really nice holly tree and learn about that, but at the same time there'll be a little glade there, and there might be a storyteller's chair there with some log stools for kids to sit on, or there might be a magnifier on a post for you to slide your leaf under to have a look at it. There might be a log walk or a balance beam. So gradually, and some of it's under the radar, I'm afraid, Joe, we will introduce points where parents can take children to learn a bit more about nature through playing. Enhancing habitats, well, we, as a result of a very successful plant fair organised by Nicola, who's at the back there, we have raised money for these 15 bat boxes that I mentioned there, and the chap who works with John Gilpin, whose name I've forgotten.
Jazz.
Was it? He offered to put them up, but apparently the climbing gear has been condemned. So he's got to get new climbing gear before the bat boxes can go up. But they're sitting in state in our gardener's shed. We have one member, James, who's offered to build us a bird feeding station near the cafe. It might not be quite as grand as the one on the road to Bamford, at the bird cafe, which is absolutely enormous. It must take tons of bird food to keep it going, but there will be a bird feeding station there. I've mentioned the brash piles and the log piles. I'll skip to promoting action for climate change. Now, we are amateurs at this. We are learning ourselves this year. We've learnt a lot from Ian and Christine, but there's more to do before we feel confident that we can kind of preach what we practice. So in the short term, we will put up some notices and use the cafe to explain to people what we're doing and why we're doing it. We'll try and encourage more people to come to the park for particularly young children, for craft events. We've got a programme of those this year. We've got the 2 trails eventually, we will have the 2 trails eventually, and we hope to do our first guided walk. Engaging with the community is actually quite labour intensive though, and the wider our network, the easier it will be, but we do find it quite, at the moment, perhaps we haven't got it quite right, but we're finding it difficult to engage with schools. I think we're all right with Dobcroft, but other schools, perhaps they don't have the means to get youngsters to come to the park. Maybe there isn't the resources now. And the teachers are so hard pressed, and it's hard to know which teacher within the school to go to when you're talking about climate change. Is it geography? Is it biology? Who is it? So we'll work on that. We've made some contact with scout groups, and we've worked with them. You know, it's a drip thing, trying to get the local people and schools further afield to try and come and see what we're doing. Maggie's done a fantastic job on publicity, and we'll keep on doing that. And we'll keep on reporting so that we can get the cycle going of action, reporting, getting feedback, doing it better, trying again. I'd just like to say, before I hand over to Nick, thank you ever so much for all the work you two have done and all your helpers over the year. It's been fantastic. And it's, yes, it has felt like it was only yesterday that we started, but heck, we've covered an awful lot during the year, so thank you. Nick, would you like to take over?
As Sheila says, we are amateurs at this. However, We're learning very slowly. And I think most people that are attending here are aware quite clearly of all the interlinks that we're talking about. Everything we do in the park is affected by climate change. Everything we do in the park affects the ecosystem, whether it's, you mentioned dogs, whether it's people or any other groups there. It all affects the ecosystem and it's all interrelated. That we've all learnt quite clearly. And obviously with Christine and Ian's help, we've got a bit more technical knowledge now. I'm not a biologist. Sheila talks about these plants. I've no idea what they are. I know what a rhododendron is. I know what a buddleia is, but that's about my limit. What I'm interested in is the wider ecosystems and also the concept of the data. It is about together for our planet. We're all aware of the erratic nature of the weather. Whether that affects the ponds as well, I'm sure it does. And in fact, I'm sure it will do so more and more. So what we need to do is to record where we are now, where we want to be, and then the big thing, the simple task, how do we get there? Now that's really what we're talking about here. We do need resilience in all senses of the word, just not only in the climate, but in the patients and everybody that's working on it. And we need you all as well, which is important. Because one of the key elements is data. We live in a society that is run by data, big data, whatever you want to use those terms. And the one thing that we really need, as Ian says, is the eco-audit. It's very slow, it's very basic. Most of us struggle to identify some of the objects, but what I really want to do is to appeal to everybody here to collect any data. If everybody records one bird, one animal, one bit of vegetation, it adds to our database, and that will be a longitudinal study. It may outsee some of us, most of us possibly, but it needs to be. That's what we need. But the biggest problem is establishing a baseline. And until you get a baseline, you can't build. It's like foundations, you've got to have those, which is why we really appeal to everybody. We're getting a feedback that says some people want to record on paper. And so what we're going to try and do is have the paper forms, they're all at the back there, that people can take away. There's a map. And if, for instance, on the volunteer days, we'll have a little session then, so we can say, right, everybody record what they see here, give them in at the end, and then we'll put them on the records so that Jane, who I know is here somewhere, I've lost over there, can do the technical recording of it all. Now that's vital. It does need everybody to do it. Too often everybody says, oh, I saw this and that, and tells us this anecdotally, but we haven't recorded it, so we don't have it on the baseline. So that's a really major task that we've got to do. And similarly, we want to work in partnership with other organisations with this data. We've got the Sheffield and Rotherham Wildlife Trust, we've got the BAT groups, the SWIFT groups, and all these groups we work with, all creating this database. And I really do appeal to everybody to contribute to this. So it's easy to do. Records are over there. If you want to sign up, there's sheets to sign up for as well, and please become a member as well. And attend the workshops, because that encourages you to then think about exactly what you're going to do. So that's my going on and on about data, as I perhaps tend to do. I've then drawn the short straw. Water management, ponds, lakes, streams, watercourses, they are vital. They're the biggest issue to me, undoubtedly. I've actually put in my notes perhaps the most controversial. Maybe I shouldn't say that, because I don't think they are controversial. I think we should be building on the natural ecological changes. And that's what we're beginning to think about. Ian has pointed out a number of the issues. It's going to make, this isn't something we can do in the simple steps of planting and clearing and things like that. We've got to think about this and how everything interrelates. Water management and wetlands is what it's about, and it is the key to the ecological enhancement of the park, I think, and also of Lynn Valley, because we've got to work with everybody else, all the other groups, particularly the work going on in the Lynn Valley on the brook with the Wildlife Trust, the retention ponds, the leaky dams, slowing the flow. All of those are vital tasks, but they're big tasks, and in many cases they involve physical labour as well, and not everybody perhaps wants to get involved in that. So again, back to membership, back to volunteers, we've got to get younger people in. The free water features in the park. The first one I call the upper pond, and Ian says treat it with kid gloves, and I think that's what we have to do because we have no choice. To do much to it is going to cost thousands, and we've got to be realistic. We've got to build on natural processes, in my view, and that's really what we're beginning to think about. Because the wetlands, they're not instant solutions, they're not instant bits of the plan in year one. We can do things around the edge. This is years 2 to 10, so it's a longer term. And we've got to look at these potentials of a bog. I think a bog's a good idea. I think it will be a unique environment in Sheffield. It will add to the parks and resources of the city. And it will then, of course, become an area that people can come and study, whether it's the universities or schools or other groups there. Go full circle, that's how you get your people back into the park as well. So I think it's actually a very interesting idea. I'm aware that other people don't necessarily agree with this, so it is something we will have to discuss, but it will be compromised. But the costs of doing the desilting, let alone the damage, are colossal. We have had some quotes. I think they're, having done some work at Porter Valley as well, I think they're very low, the estimates we got. I'm not too sure about whether they're practical. The link waterways, that is something we can get on with in the short term. We can replant bits of that, we can clear bits of that to increase flow. We can't do much about catchments, we're not that expert in that, we rely on Ian's advice. The lower pond, what I call the duck pond, only because I've seen the pretty ducks as well there. They may not be natural, but they're very nice, and I don't think we want to get rid of them, to be honest. We've got to accept this natural change, and that's what it's about. We've got to accept the changes have happened over the last 100 years or whatever. That's where we are now. We then add in the problem of climate coming in, and that's going to be yet another change. So we're not in a static environment. So we've got to look at that area. We have, finally, we hope, Sheila, don't we, controlled the major leak into the lower car park. I say that, but let's wait until we get some really heavy rain and other things, and we'll see what happens. But we think we've done that fairly simply. The access waterways we need to clear and look at. Natural planting is the key there, and again, that can be done, and that's something that will possibly be year 1 into year 2, possibly year 3. But that's a move forward. The mill pond, or your lake, it looks lovely in the pictures here. When it was a lake, there's a beautiful vista down from the house. But I've never really thought of it as a lake, but our imaginations obviously vary on that. The fact that it's a natural breeding ground is superb. But again, we've got to protect that environment. We've got to protect it because it does have, if it's a wonderful ecosystem there, we're not going to be able to desilt it, as Ian said. So we've got to live with what we've got. We need to fence it, though, along the Lim Valley. That's a cost. But it's a health and safety issue. We always emphasise health and safety issues when there's senior councillors here. But I've worked with them too long. But the fence along the Lim Valley, dogs get in, dogs will affect the ducks. Children get in, there's a child safety issue as well. There's a derelict pontoon there. There are other users, but we need to look at that. But Ian's right, what we've got to do is do an audit of that particular area. So that's another task. That's probably for the first year, working with the workshops and the other group as well, that it is vital to do. So that is a major area. We also, though, need to look at the other water aspects. Water storage. We use the hose pipes a lot. Hose pipe bans occur. If we're going to try and maintain some of the more formal gardens as well, how are we going to store water? Where are the water butts? Again, short-term, simple, relatively simple solutions if we can work with the local authority in particular to get those in. The other streams we've mentioned, the effects of what's going on in rough stand hills, well, we really do rely on the experts to tell us what's happening there because it is quite complex. But the Lim Valley links and working with those is equally important. So there is lots to do. It is going to be demanding in time, energy, costs, particularly when we're talking about these waterways. But to me, I think Ian probably agrees, it is the crux of what the park is about and its ecosystem. And as we keep saying, we need more and more people to quote, to develop the park and the valley, enhance the ecosystems and develop resilience against a changing climate. That's what the project's about. It's not going to be a quick fix. We're starting on a plan. The plan will change. Don't hold us to the plan. We will have targets because we've all been brought up in that environment, and then we'll think of excuses why we don't hit them and then change them. However, we need help. We've had great help, and I again, as Sheila, I want to thank Ian and Christine in particular because their expertise and guidance has been superb to us. And I also want to, thank everybody here for attending, and we're open to questions, but not too many and not too many technical ones. We prefer people to offer us solutions today. Thank you.